Listen to Paul. Do your best to come to me soon, for only Luke is with me. Demas has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia. Titus to Dalmatia. I have sent Tychicus to Ephesus. Alexander the coppersmith did me great harm. You also must be aware of him, for he strongly opposed our message. At my first defense, no one came to support me, but all deserted me. May it not be counted against them. When our backs are against the wall, it hurts when our friends avoid us. It especially hurts when our friends run from us. But this happens. If you're going to fight the good fight, expect that there are going to be some people who are going to say, well, I love you, but you're on your own with this one. It looks like Paul had already been through one trial, and then he was looking for another one. It didn't look like this one was going to turn out very well. In his first trial, all of his friends had deserted him. Only Luke is with him. Now, Paul could have held on to that abandonment. He could have nursed that abandonment in the spirit of bitterness. But he didn't. Look what he says. May it not be counted against them. The man for whom following Jesus had meant the loss of so much now follows Jesus in a prayer of grace concerning those whose abandonment had hurt so much. May it not be counted against them. Sounds very much like, Father, forgive them. The point is, we must learn to show mercy if we are to fight the good fight well, because bitterness is a weight you can't carry in the good fight. At the same time Paul was showing mercy toward the people who had deserted him, he also appeared to be requesting mercy from someone else. Look at 2 Timothy 4:11, the B part. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is useful in my ministry. This Mark is one John Mark, for whom we have a gospel named. This is the Mark with whom Paul and Barnabas had with them on a missionary journey. This is the Mark who became homesick on the missionary journey and left them and went back for home. And when they got back and were getting ready to go out on another missionary journey, Barnabas wanted to take Mark with them. But Paul was so intolerant toward Mark and so outdone with Mark, he said, I won't go with Mark. Their dispute was so fierce that Paul and Barnabas parted company. Now, at the end of his days, it looks like Paul is thinking, I might have been a little bit too hard there. Look at what he says. Get Mark. Bring him with you, for he is useful in my ministry. Mark wasn't useful to Paul because Paul had a hard heart about how Mark had left him. But now Paul realizes that he needs some mercy. And he needs to ask Mark for some forgiveness. So he needs to have Mark come. Paul can't go apologize. But he can ask Mark to come to him. Mark is useful. Paul has to forgive Mark, and he has to ask Mark for forgiveness. Well, who has wounded you? Who have you wounded? What wounds are you carrying around because of some old fight. At the same time, notice that Paul cautions Timothy about Alexander. If living means being involved in a good fight, we have to be expecting some folks in the fight not to fight fair, to fight dirty, and to be downright low down and mean. Alexander the coppersmith did me great harm. You must also be aware of him, for he strongly opposed our message. We have to learn to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. It would be wise of us as we get ready to leave this world to tell those we love. Now, there are some people in the world you need to watch out for. And understand, all of us know people that we know are up to no good. Amen. Some of them are kinfolk. Some of them are close folk. And if we are wise and if we love people around us, it makes sense to say, now you need to keep an eye on such and such. You know, Bay and Uncle Sugar, you need to watch them. You know, you need to watch Uncle Sugar. Where are the people who are threatening as you fight the good fight, and what are you doing to alert other folks you love who are trying to fight the good fight also? Keep an eye out on this person. Lastly, remember that victorious living involves trusting in God's justice and mercy. Paul has fought the good fight. He has finished the race. He has kept the faith. He has endured the wounds that come from living for God's grace and God's truth. He's included in that living wounds that come from others, as well as wounds he has inflicted on others, and self-inflicted wounds, wounds he's inflicted on himself. And now his time is running down. And so Paul speaks with a trust that is electrifying. From now on, there is reserved for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me, and also to those who have longed for his appearing. Alexander the coppersmith did me great harm. The Lord will repay him for all he did. Everybody else has deserted me, but the Lord stood by me and gave me strength at my first trial. I'm not worried about anything, Timothy. The Lord will rescue me from every evil attack and will save me for his heavenly kingdom. What are you saying, Paul? Paul is telling us that we are vulnerable people in a world filled with challenges and challenging people. And ultimately, we will either trust God's grace and God's justice and God's mercy for our living and our futures, or our time in the world will be marked by fear, resentment, and greed. Like Jesus, Paul looked to the end of his days trusting God's justice and mercy. Paul understood that his duty was to fight the fight. His duty was to finish the race. His duty was to keep the faith. His duty was not to judge the fight. He was not to judge the race, and he was not to judge the faith. That business was God's bookkeeping. What are you saying, preacher? I am telling you and me that we have the good fight of God's justice and love and truth to fight. We have that to do with our living. We have a marathon to run for God. We have a great faith to keep for God. And in the course of fighting the good fight and keeping the faith and running the race, we will be wounded and we will inflict wounds on others. But we can trust God to be fair and merciful. I like how Paul put this. Alexander the coppersmith did me great harm. The Lord will pay him back. I'm not worried about Alexander. When we were children growing up, and my sister, brother, and I were at home alone because after we got old enough to stay by ourselves, parents were working, we could stay by ourselves. Of course, as children, we would sometimes do stuff to each other we had no business. And the temptation would always be to try to get back ourselves. I was never worried as much about my sister or my brother getting back at me as I was worried when they said, I'm going to tell Mama. When they said, I'm going to tell Mama, I'm going to tell Daddy, Lord have mercy. A chill went down my spirit. Accountability was coming. And I tried to spend the rest of my day being nice to my sister and brother. Hopefully in the niceness to inject them with a sort of moral amnesia so that they would somehow be charitable in the telling if they told at all. Alexander the coppersmith did me great harm. The Lord will pay him back. Victorious living involves trusting God's justice and trusting God's mercy. We spend a lot of the energy we need for the good fight worrying about how to get back at folks who have hurt us. Paul says, I'm not worried about Alexander. I have shipped him to Daddy. And I trust Daddy to deal with Alexander a whole lot better than I can. What Paul was doing was preparing Timothy on how to deal with the folks who hurt him too. Watch out for Alexander. Alexander's a bad man. Alexander hurt me. Alexander opposed our message. You watch out for Alexander. But watch out for Alexander without worrying about Alexander. Tell the Lord. And let the Lord deal with Alexander. In the final analysis, Paul is telling us to fight the good fight with courage, trusting God's justice and mercy for the strength we need in the fight. Don't run from the fight. Embrace it. Don't dodge the fight. Accept it. Finish the long race, trusting God's mercy and justice as you run. When you get tired, slow down, but don't stop running. When you get tired, walk if you have to, but don't stop the race. Keep the faith, however you know the faith, and however you understand the faith. Keep it, knowing that God's justice and God's mercy will keep you, even as you keep the faith. And then prepare those who love you to join you in trusting God's justice and trusting God's mercy as you prepare to depart and as you look ahead. Because you see, the justice and mercy of God endureth forever. And so the departure from here is simply arrival somewhere else.